right at the outset of his ministry, God declares that his Son is the exalted King promised in the line of David. And we go right to the end of the Bible, to the book of Revelation. We read this, when John falls at his feet as though dead on the island of Patmos. This one with whom he is so familiar. He's the beloved disciple. He's rested his head on Jesus' breast. And now when Jesus reveals himself to him in all his glory on that island of Patmos, we read this. And from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. This king that Mark has revealed to us in the earlier stages of his gospel, and particularly in chapter 10, and now following on into chapter 11 to the end of this gospel, is the exalted king. He is the ruler of the kings of the earth. Now, if we go through the Gospels, past this particular section, towards his death, we begin to see the manner in which this king sets up his throne so that he can reign not just over the kings of the earth, but over every single believer who comes to him. If you're a Christian tonight, this is your King, King Jesus. He is the humiliated King. Here is the ruler of the kings of the earth now being worshipped as a child by these magi. And as that child began to grow, his humiliation began to grow with him. Despised and rejected of men. And we've seen it already in Mark's gospel. His role in coming as king is to unseat Satan from his throne. Satan ruling over mankind. Satan oppressing, possessing human beings. We've seen it as he's delivered people from disease. We've seen it as he's delivered people from demonic possession. Here is a king challenging another king, a usurper to the throne, and defeating him in his humiliation. Remember, he said this, John 12, 31 to 32. Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to me. Here is God, the second person of the Trinity, humiliated in human flesh. And the first role of his ministry as he travels through Galilee and down into Jerusalem is to unseat Satan from his throne. And he does this, as we've said, in various ways. We've seen it demonstrated in his challenges to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We've seen it in the casting out of these demons and in the way he has ministered to Satan's captives and set them free. Paul, writing to the church at Colossae, says this, by cancelling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. There's his role as the humiliated king. To do as Paul said, disarm rulers, authorities, and put them to shame, openly disarming them. And we've seen this so magnificently in his ministry to all these different people. People who were rejected in society, people who never felt they had anything that would commend themselves to him. Think of that Syrophoenician woman. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. Go your way, your daughter has been made well. And the leper who came to him, totally rejected by everyone in society, no one would go near him. Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Jesus touched him. I am willing. be thou clean. And immediately the leprosy departed from him. He came into this world to demonstrate the disarming of Satan, the usurper to the throne over mankind, that he might reign as the king of all his people. And of course, he was a king in his judgment and in his death upon the cross. In a sense, and only in a sense, the cross was his coronation. And we see this depicted again in the story surrounding the cross. It's quite clear when we read about the cross, we're reading about a king. The Bible makes this explicit for us. Let me give you some illustrations again. Again from Matthew's Gospel this time. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him. They took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to crucify him. Think of those magi who came to the young child Jesus, who offered him gifts of gold, frankincense and myrrh, who bowed down before him to declare him to be the messianic king of the Jews. Just imagine that they were invited to his coronation. And there's the coronation. There's the scene that Matthew's painted for us in his gospel. Like no other coronation. A crown of thorns, sweat and blood, cries of pain and agony from others who are being crucified, the spitting, the mocking, the shouting, the horror. One of the most obscene scenes in human history. And here is the king in his humiliation. John tells us they took Jesus. He went out bearing his own cross to the place they called the place of a skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. And then again it takes a Gentile, someone outside of the Jewish nation, to make this almost sarcastic reference that declares him to be king of the Jews. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Oh, he hated the Jews. And he knew that whenever they looked up at that cross and saw those words, they would be mortified. And they would hate him. Chief priests and the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews." But he said, "I am the King of the Jews." So there you have it. You have in the hearts and minds of these magi the realization that they come to one who is a king, who is worthy of exaltation, who is worthy of their worship, and they bow before him. There, at the scene of the cross, we have all that's rotten in mankind. But we have within that rottenness a coronation scene that is more profound and more beautiful than any crown that's ever been put on a monarch in history, with diamonds and gold and all the trappings and trimmings of a coronation and the beautiful music and the ceremony. And there, on Calvary's cross, is the humiliated king. And in between, we have the lowly king, the Lord Jesus Christ, riding in to Jerusalem on a donkey, declaring that kingship in all its lowly splendor. And again, the most beautiful coronation procession you could ever witness or imagine. No gold coach, no soldiers marching on with a gleaming armour, polished especially for the day. No fanfare of trumpets. Just this man on a donkey, followed by all these people. The coronation procession of a king. Having left Jericho, that's the last time we saw him. He was in Jericho and he was leaving Jericho, you remember, and he met Bartimaeus and he healed Bartimaeus, and he was making his final preparation now for his entry into Jerusalem. And we know the story, we're very familiar with it, we won't go into any detail, but the disciples were sent to this nearby village where they procured this donkey and this colt, the foal of an ass, and they prepared the procession. And of course, the first thing we notice is in the line of everything else that's said about his kingship, it is prophesied. It is there in the Old Testament. We saw it in this reading from Samuel. 2 Samuel 7, 12, 13. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come out of your body. And I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house of my name. I will establish his throne of his kingdom forever. And then the detailed prophecy. Rejoice so greatly, says the prophet Zechariah, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he. Humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And again, if you were to read that in the days of the Old Testament, to read that in the intertestamental period, and even read it in the days of Jesus, you would wonder, what is Zechariah saying? Because this is not the way kings arrive. This is not a coronation procession. It's the very opposite. And there is Jesus doing exactly what Zechariah prophesied.